On the coldest night of winter, Jack Mitchell found a pregnant teenager shivering at a bus stop, kicked out by her family with nowhere to go. Despite barely making ends meet as a widowed father, he offered her shelter for one night. That single act of kindness would change their lives forever in ways neither could imagine. Jack was about to turn away from the window when he noticed a figure huddled on the bench at the bus stop across the street. Something wasn't right. The last bus had left hours ago, and nobody should be sitting outside in this freezing weather. Concerned, he grabbed his coat and headed downstairs. As he approached the bench, he found a teenage girl, no older than 17, shivering violently. Her thin jacket offered little protection against the biting cold, and her face was streaked with frozen tears. But what caught Jack's attention most was her visibly pregnant belly. "Are you okay?" Jack asked, already knowing the answer. The girl looked up, her eyes filled with fear and distrust. "I'm fine," she whispered through chattering teeth, though she was clearly anything but. "You'll freeze to death out here," Jack said. "The next bus isn't until morning. Do you have somewhere to go?" She shook her head, looking away. "My parents kicked me out when they found out I was pregnant. My boyfriend left town. I've been staying with a friend, but her mom found out today and told me I couldn't stay anymore." Jack felt a knot in his stomach. He had enough problems of his own, barely enough money for rent, working overtime to afford Emily's asthma medication, and the constant struggle of being both mother and father to his little girl. The last thing he needed was another responsibility. But as he looked at the girl's swollen belly and frightened eyes, he thought of his late wife's words, "Kindness costs nothing but means everything." "I have a couch," he said simply. "It's not much, but it's warm. You can stay tonight and we'll figure something out tomorrow." The girl hesitated, then nodded gratefully as another violent shiver ran through her body. "I'm Sophia," she managed. "Jack," he replied, helping her up. "Let's get you inside." Sophia slept on Jack's couch that night, wrapped in every spare blanket he owned. The temporary arrangement stretched into days, then weeks. Jack called in favors from every social service he knew, but teenage pregnancy shelters were full and waiting lists were long. Emily, with the innocent acceptance only children possess, quickly became attached to their new house guest, fascinated by the baby growing in Sophia's belly. "Is the baby cold too?" she asked one morning, placing her small hand on Sophia's stomach. Sophia smiled, a rare sight in those early days. "No, the baby is nice and warm in there." Emily nodded seriously. "Good. Because Daddy says nobody should be cold at Christmas." Jack watched from the kitchen doorway, his heart torn. His apartment was too small for 3 people, let alone 4 once the baby arrived. His salary barely covered their current expenses. But each time he came home to find Sophia helping Emily with her reading or cooking a simple meal from their meager pantry supplies, he found himself postponing the inevitable conversation about other arrangements. The breaking point came 6 weeks after Sophia arrived. Jack's factory announced layoffs and his name was on the list. That night, after Emily was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, bills spread out before him. "I'll leave tomorrow," Sophia said quietly from the doorway. "I've been a burden long enough." Jack looked up, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "And go where?" "You're 8 months pregnant, Sophia." "I don't know," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But I can't keep taking from you when you have nothing to give." Jack stared at the bills, then at the frightened teenager who had somehow become part of his small, broken family. "We'll figure it out," he said finally, though he had no idea how. The next morning, Jack's elderly neighbor Mrs. Chin knocked on their door. She had overheard their conversation through the thin walls and offered Sophia a job helping in her small laundry business. "You can fold and sort," she said firmly. "Not too much standing. Good for pregnant girl." Meanwhile, Jack took on night shifts at a local gas station while searching for better-paying work during the day. Between the 2 jobs he barely slept, but they managed to keep the lights on and food on the table. When Sophia went into labor on a snowy February morning, Jack drove her to the hospital in his ancient car that threatened to break down at any moment. Emily sat in the back seat, clutching her favorite teddy bear that she insisted the new baby would need. "I'm scared," Sophia whispered between contractions. Jack, who had not left his wife's side during Emily's birth, took Sophia's hand. "You're not alone," he promised. "We're right here with you." 14 hours later, Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named Noah. As Jack watched her cradle her son with a mixture of terror and wonder, he recognized the same expression he'd worn when Emily was born. At home, their cramped apartment became even smaller with the addition of a crying newborn. Sleep became a luxury none of them got enough of. Jack continued working both jobs, coming home to help with night feeding so Sophia could rest. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under his eyes. Despite their circumstances, they developed a routine. Jack would work his night shift, sleep for a few hours, then watch Noah while Sophia worked at Mrs. Chen's laundry. They traded the baby between them like a relay baton, exhausted but determined. 3 months after Noah's birth, Sophia received a letter that changed everything. Her grandmother, whom she hadn't seen in years due to a family rift, had passed away. The letter was from a lawyer informing her that she had inherited her grandmother's small house in a town 30 miles away. "I don't know what to do," Sophia confessed to Jack that night. "It's a real house with a yard. Noah could have his own room." But what?" Jack asked, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in his chest at the thought of them leaving. "But you and Emily are the only family we have," she said simply. "How can I take Noah away from that?" Jack looked around their tiny apartment, at Emily sleeping on her pull-out bed, at Noah in his second-hand crib, at the leaking ceiling and peeling wallpaper. He thought about how, despite everything, they had created something that felt like a family. "What if," he said slowly, "we all went?" The house wasn't large, just 2 bedrooms, a small living room and a kitchen with outdated appliances. But compared to Jack's apartment, it felt like a mansion. Emily ran from room to room in delight, while Jack stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. "Are you sure about this?" he asked Sophia for the 100th time as they moved in their few possessions. "This is your inheritance. You don't owe us anything." Sophia looked at him, bouncing Noah on her hip. "You took me in when no one else would. You gave up your couch, your privacy, your food, everything. This isn't about owing. This is about family." She paused, then added quietly, "Unless you don't want to stay." Jack thought about the last 6 months, how his life had been turned upside down by a chance encounter on a snowy night. How, despite the additional struggles, there had also been unexpected moments of joy. Emily's delight at having someone else to talk to, Noah's first smile, the shared meals at their crowded table where, somehow, there was always enough to go around. "We'll stay," he said finally. "But I'll pay rent. And I'll fix up the place." And so, Jack found a job at a local manufacturing plant, working regular hours for the first time in months. Sophia went back to school to get her GED with Jack and Mrs. Chen, who had surprisingly decided to move to the same town, taking turns watching Noah. Emily started at the local elementary school, making friends and bringing home artwork that soon covered the refrigerator. The house slowly transformed under Jack's careful attention during weekends. He fixed the leaking roof, painted walls, and planted a small garden that Emily claimed as her special project. For the first time since his wife died, Jack felt like he was building something, not just surviving. Dad, look what Noah can do." Emily, now 10, called from the backyard where she was teaching 5-year-old Noah to ride a bike without training wheels. Jack watched from the kitchen window as Noah wobbled, then found his balance, pedaling several feet before toppling over with a laugh. Emily helped him up and they tried again. "They're growing up so fast," Sophia said, coming to stand beside him. At 22, she looked nothing like the terrified teenager he'd found on that bench. She had graduated with her nursing degree the previous month and had already started working at the local clinic. "Too fast," Jack agreed, smiling as Noah successfully rode a little further this time. Sophia hesitated, then said, "I got a call from Noah's father yesterday." Jack froze. This was a moment he had sometimes feared, that Noah's biological father would reappear and disrupt the life they had built together. "He found me through social media," Sophia continued. "He wants to meet Noah." "And what do you want?" Jack asked carefully. "I told him no," Sophia said firmly. "Noah already has a father. The best one I could have ever hoped for." She looked at Jack, the man who had given up his couch on a freezing night and in doing so, had saved both her and her son. "You're his dad in every way that matters." Jack felt a lump in his throat. Though he had never legally adopted Noah, the boy called him Dad, just as Emily did. He had been there for first steps, first words, first everything. "I was thinking," Sophia said, "maybe we should make it official. For Noah's sake." Jack looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Adoption papers," she clarified. "I want you to adopt Noah. Legally." Jack was speechless. After a moment he managed, "Sophia, are you sure?" "He's your son." "And he's your son too," she said simply. "You've been his father since before he was born." Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of how their unusual family had evolved over the years. What had started as an act of kindness had grown into something neither of them had expected. The adoption process took months, but finally, the day arrived when Noah officially became Noah Mitchell. They celebrated with a small party in the backyard, with Mrs. Chin bringing her famous dumplings and Emily proudly showing off the sign she had made, official family day. As the evening wound down, Jack found himself sitting on the porch steps, watching Emily and Noah chase fireflies in the twilight. Sophia joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "Happy?" she asked. "More than I ever thought possible," he admitted. "When Rachel died, I thought that was it for me. Just me and Emily against the world." Sophia nodded. "And when my parents kicked me out, I thought my life was over before it had really begun." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play. Finally, Jack turned to her. "You know, people keep saying I saved you that night. But the truth is you saved us too. Emily needed more than just a tired, overworked dad. And I needed—" He paused, struggling to find the words. "A miracle?" Sophia suggested with a small smile. Jack laughed softly. "Yeah, I guess that's it. A miracle." As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Jack thought about how life's hardest moments sometimes led to unexpected blessings. 5 years ago, he had been a struggling single father who could barely keep his head above water. Now he had a home, a job he enjoyed, a daughter who was thriving, and a son and a partner he never could have anticipated. "You know," Sophia said thoughtfully, "we never did figure out what would happen with the sleeping arrangements when I first showed up at your apartment." Jack smiled. "No, we didn't." "Maybe," she said, her voice soft but sure, "it's time we did." As Noah and Emily ran back to show them the fireflies they had caught in a jar, Jack knew that his life had come full circle. The kindness he had shown on the coldest night of the year had returned to him 100-fold, in the form of a family that had been pieced together by circumstance but strengthened by love. Sometimes, Jack reflected as he put his arm around Sophia's shoulders, the greatest miracles come disguised as our greatest challenges. And sometimes they come in the form of a shivering girl on a bench who ends up changing everything.